off. That's definitely stressful for me personally, but a hurdle that I've learned, like, okay, you have to plan way in advance. And certain artists, okay, I gotta give that guy a runway of 6 months, I gotta give this guy a runway of 8 months. And the more that you could think of all these sorts of things, the smoother it will be in terms of getting your books out to the readers. When you say you'll get them out.
Can I add to that a little bit? Just for myself, because you work with artists, but for me, I come from the animation background where I work with a team. For me, it was actually refreshing, because I'm a writer and artist, to have something that I can do myself and don't have to wait on anyone. So that was actually, for me, it actually works out the other way. That was it's so refreshing for me for making comics. Yeah.
And I know we touched a little bit upon the logistics side of stuff, but I want to ask you, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's an aspiring, like, artist, animator, all that?
No. I'm joking.
I don't think they heard you. That's pretty funny. Speaking of the mic stuff.
I said give up.
Very inspiring. Yeah. Or inspiring artists or something.
Something very, very inspiring.
I don't know about inspiring, but I would just say that don't be afraid of working for free at times, or taking internships or things like that. A lot of times, the stuff that you'll learn the most is when you're willing to either work for free or work for little. And if you're humble, if you're willing to be that guy that does the job that nobody else wants to do, you'll learn a lot about yourself, and you'll get your foot into the door into a lot of places. And I guess the other thing would just be like, if you believe in your heart that your vocation is to be a writer or an artist or what have you, you really have no choice but to do that and to kind of like soldier on no matter what. And even if it seems like you're going through the dark times or whatever, if you just keep pushing and you believe in yourself and you're doing your best to learn and hone your craft, eventually that opportunity or window of time will present itself where you can get your project out into the world to the most amount of people.
I would say, if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to think about the why. So many young and aspiring creators think about how. And how do I get better? How do I do this? How do I do that? And those are actually the easy questions to solve for the most part. And so what you end up with is, I've seen too many creators that are just like so focused on improvement and getting to whatever, and they're focused on the how, that they end up in places, and sometimes they're really successful, and then all of a sudden they look around and they're not very happy. They haven't thought about why they're doing it. Why do you want to get up every day and make comics? Why do you want to write? Why do you want to draw? What impact do you want to make on the world? So, fall in love with it, the process, because you have to know the why. You have to have that inspiration, because otherwise, what are you doing it for? There are so many easier ways to make a living than art or comics or whatever. So you have to really love it. It has to be what you want to do.
I would say, honestly, the biggest one I hear from a lot of people is they go, I really want to make comics, but I need to do X, Y, and Z first. So I would say, do the thing you want to do. If you want to make comics, even if you think you're bad at it, and you think you need to learn how to panel, you need to learn how to write a script, you need to do this or that, just make a comic. Him and I started at 15 years old. We had no idea how to make a comic, and we made hundreds of them together. And that's the only way to get better at the thing you want to do, is just to do and make the thing you want to make. Don't worry about it being good or it being this or what you need to do. Just make what you want to make. We hear so many people that worry about so many things. They worry about their story being too generic. They worry about, them falling into cliches. And if you just make the thing you want to make, it'll get you closer to whatever your goal, whatever that why is. Maybe it's not as good as you want it to be, but it'll be you, and it'll be unique, and it'll be one step closer to making whatever the next thing is.
I'm going to second what's been said before. I think if you're an artist, it doesn't really matter what medium it is. You could be a musician, whatever. If you're a real artist, you're going to have to do it anyways. It doesn't matter if you have a day job at the time. You're going to have to keep soldiering on until that opportunity arises. You just got to keep pushing. And if you're an artist, you know that you don't have a choice. You're just going to have to do it. It's a curse.
The piece of advice I would give is to improve your talent stack as you go. So take all of the advice that they say, and I know the younger people know what I'm talking about when I say like achievement unlocked. So you know what I mean? Like when you learn how to like change your own oil, or you learn how to, I don't know, fix your computer on your own, you feel like that little light goes off that says achievement unlocked, I've learned this. Well, as you continue in your pursuits, do not be afraid to improve your talent stack. Try to learn new things. For example, Sven is an animator, I am not. I don't know anything about animation, but in a pinch, sometimes I have to hand animate my own thing, and so it's like, well, I guess I'm gonna learn how to animate, even though I have to take 2 hours out of my time, and so I look up YouTube videos, and it's like, how to animate for dummies, and here's how to animate using like 7 frames, and you know, to be honest, so I tried it, and I was like, I think this looks okay, and then I gave it to Sven, and I was like, what do you think? And he basically, he was very polite, didn't say anything, he gave it to me and it was already approved, because
I'll redo this
he
real
was like, I'll redo it real quick, and he made it like 10 times better. But it taught me a lot of things because I got it back and I thought, well, what did he do that was different? And so I was able to learn, and I feel like it's like achievement unlocked. Like I learned something about how animation works, and I was able to compare my mess up to his improvement, and rather than, you know, take that personally or be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much I suck at animation, I felt like I improved on that. Same thing with like Doug. When we were starting out, I was helping him collate PDFs. So for his print job, I could be like, okay, just give me your files, I'll assemble it for the printer. Well, he didn't even tell me, but for the second go around, he didn't even go through me, because he was thinking to himself at some point, what if Tim's not around? I have to do this on my own because I'm the project lead. So him and the printer actually sat down and they talked about how to format a book for print so that it's print ready. And here we are, he's like 5 volumes in, and he's never asked me again for formatting because he learned how to do it on his own. So don't get into this rut of being like, I'm the artist, my only job is to do the art, or I'm the writer, I just write. The more you can pick up here and there, the better you'll be, because you'll be a lot more versatile in your craft.
Alright, before I turn it over for some audience questions, I'd like to ask if there's any specific future projects you could tell us about, nothing like that you can't.
We'll start over here.
Sure. So Soulfinder 4 Tunnel Hounds just came out, and Soulfinder 5 Silent Service is on the way. Matt Weldon is the artist, and hopefully it'll be here at Bell County Comic Con next year.
You're saying that, really? Yeah, I'm currently working on Butch Gilligan number 2. Only like 20, 30 more pages to go, but yeah, that should be ready. Hopefully come in October, November.
We have Kamen America 10, which should be debuting sometime this fall. Kamen America the manga sometime in the spring, and then we have a few unannounced projects I can't talk about at the moment. But if you got the brochure, we had stated that it's the debut of Carly's America, which is the prequel to Kamen America. That's going to be free to read on Webtoon, and it's going to be sometime this fall after the current Kamen Academy series ends. But we're really excited about that one. If there was anything that I could think of where I think to myself, this will be our best work in terms of things that I think will be accessible to people of all ages, this is the one that I think hopefully will be like our gold standard personally as a creative team.
And is there any like specific booth at the con we can find you guys at?
We're going to be in Hall A, so in the giant rotunda. We're right next to the merch booth, so as soon as you go downstairs, just look for us immediately on the left.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
I'll ask another one second. This is so hard to explain out loud. I've been getting into D&D and storytelling through that, and I found I think of a lot of my own internal tropes, such as like whenever I think of a character, I'm like, oh, their parents are divorced, so they have to act this way. So I have a whole bunch of like, every time I think of a character, there's something wrong, and I always find I go back to the same trope. So, not that it's a bad thing, but do you guys have any common tropes that you do when you just write that you don't necessarily think of?
I'll get that to Bryce. He and Doug are the writers.
Well, I'm sure I do. He calls me out on them all the time. I always forget about them. I know one of them is I used to love to include circuses in all of my books. I don't know why. Can you think of any that I do that are really bad? Oh, saying characters' names. That's a big one. I say people's names a lot.
Yeah, we have I think in the first 3 or 4 series that we actually put out, the protagonist's parents were dead. And, you know, that's something we really had to learn to get away from.
Doug, is there anything?
I kind of said this last year, is find somebody in your life who will tell you when you do really dumb things, and that's my wife. And so I bounce ideas off her, and off the top of my head I can't think of it, but I know that multiple times I'll be like, what do you think about this idea? And she'll be like, that's really dumb. And then I'll be like, oh, okay. And then I trust her, and then we'll kind of change course or whatever. So just find someone in your life who's brutally honest with you, and you know that they love you and they want the best for you. And so when they tell you, hey man, you've done this again and again and again, try something new, then you'll just take that and fix it.
Yeah, I actually think that tropes can also work in your favor. I mean, I think the word subversion has gotten a bad rap nowadays online because of those Brian Johnson Star Wars movies and stuff. People do like subversion for subversion's sake. But it's actually like somebody like Quentin Tarantino does this really well. He takes you on a ride and you think you're gonna go right and he yanks the steering wheel and you go left, you know what I'm saying? So you can use tropes to your advantage by painting a certain expectation and twisting that. That's very satisfying. It's like how a joke works as well, you know what I'm saying? A little twist, that little punchline. That's how you can use tropes, and that's the way that I like to use it.
I'll add to that, one thing is that we try and tell people is that tropes aren't always bad. People hear the word trope and they instantly think, oh, that must be horrible. But sometimes the most obvious outcome or event is the most obvious because it makes the most sense, or it's the best one. So we get asked sometimes like, oh, I have these tropes in my thing, and well, sometimes it's bad, but sometimes it's not. It doesn't automatically mean that you shouldn't do that.
Have you seen, are you all aware of tvtropes.com?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was shocked because it turns out we're on tvtropes.com, and I thought, holy cow, this is not good. But we went through it, and it was flattering because it would be things like, well, I learned something where it's like, in a way, in storytelling, a lot of it's unavoidable because there's gonna be repetition of motif. But it's the way that you can take that motif and work it to your advantage. And so I was reading through it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a scathing series of articles about our work. And it was like, no, it was very positive because it was like, well, they did this and this character. But then you find out that they inverted it and they went to this trope. And so like, I was going through all of our articles and I thought, hey, that wasn't so bad. So what Sven said was really true. And in the case of Sven, you have a lot of characters who are basically walking tropes. They're hyper stereotypes.
That's the thing. That's the thing. And increasingly, of course, I'm not going to spoil anything, of course, but increasingly so, you're going to see what this story was actually about. Nobody knows yet, but at least it's going to be great.
Any questions? Any more questions? One in the back, yes.
Is there any one part of the story that you believe, or history of any of your stories you wrote, where you focus on, let's say, one thing, for example, a story element, foreshadowing, or any character interactions?
Can you repeat the middle part again?
It was settings, foreshadowing, or character interactions. Trying to structure the story to where you want it to go, and sometimes you may have to go back and have to rewrite, or have to analyze your character, that future events.
You're constantly doing that. So you write your first draft, and then you go back to the beginning and you make it seem as if you meant it all the way. You know what I'm saying? As if it was your idea all along. That's basically what that is. And then the more drafts, like Back to the Future, people call it the perfect movie because of up to 40 drafts or something like that. You know
40 drafts?
Or even more probably. Like they set everything up perfectly. So yeah, that's the way you do that.
Yeah, even with this book, all the way up until we were about to print, there were little things in terms of sound effects and little tweaks to the word balloons and stuff that went all the way up. So you're always kind of noticing somewhere where you made a little mistake or you could refine something. And it's really just the revision process, as Sven was saying. I was telling someone yesterday, he's like, I'm not a very good writer. And I was like, well, the good thing about writing is there's a revision process, and you can turn something that looks like coal into a diamond as long as you keep chipping away at it over and over and over again.
I think one of the things, like Kindred Heavens, for example, book one probably went through 15 drafts. It went through a lot of drafts, and even up to the point that the script was fully written and Scott was actually drawing it, there's like one specific scene near the end of the book that he was 2 pages away from drawing, and we scrapped 30 pages and redid it, like even to that late. And I think it's that it's important to constantly be evaluating and self-evaluating your own work. But I also think it's very important to know when to stop doing that, because you get to a point where you're so zoomed in on your draft, right, that you're seeing little things, the tiniest little things, that you're looking and you're like, oh my God, his hand is what's his hand doing here? It's bending a weird way. You're worrying about things that no one's going to notice, or things that don't matter. Things that if you start to tweak, you actually could make things worse. So I think my biggest piece of advice would be, to really fix your story and work on it and go through as many drafts as needed. But also, for me, it's Scott. Have someone who knows when it's time to stop. Because as a writer, it's very hard to know when to stop, because you always want to make your work better.
Yes.
All of you, especially Tim and Mark, have quite the international following, especially in Japan. So, if you can answer this, what is the common link between all of y'all, how y'all got this much?
So here's the interesting thing about how we, about growing in Japan. Ironically, we did not ever expect to do that, which is why people had asked, like, why didn't you translate your book into Japanese from the very beginning? And it's like, well, in our minds, our competition wasn't the Japanese, our competition's other Americans. But what happened was, a lot of your success is a combination of right place, right time, and luck, to be honest. And we just got very lucky because we had a Japanese reader for volume 3, and he just happened to be, he just likes American comics. And he had been used to reading Lady Death. And so he was like, well, I'm gonna pick up this book because it looks interesting, and the name is half Japanese. And so he liked it. Well, it turns out the guy he's the head of the Dojin circle for Comic Head for a particular group of writers and artists. And so he was like, this is great. And so it's one of those cases of you never know who's watching or reading your book. So you never take readers for granted. You never do that. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter what their socioeconomic class is. It doesn't matter how old they are, for example, because you never know whose eyes are going to be on it. So what you want to do is, if you're intending to do it seriously, one thing that we all can say we do is we all put our best foot forward. You might not like it, but we'll tell you, at the time that we did this, it was not just slapdash. It was something that took a lot of care and craft, and we present it to you and hope you like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mark and I, we create a lot of stuff, we tell a lot of jokes, and we could have easily just phoned it in and just said, you know what, we have this character, yeah, let's just go with this model, and just kind of said, whatever, as long as I get paid, I'm happy. But if that guy in Japan read it and just thought, well, I paid with international shipping, I paid $40 for this book, and it just seems like they didn't care, why should I care? But he cared enough to be like, this is really good. I want to work with this. So then he bought volume 4, volume 5, and he said, no, I really do think this is going somewhere. I want to do it. And it was funny because we just attended the convention where we were approached by a lot of creators who don't want anything to do with us in the social space. So in terms of like social media, we're persona non grata. But they were barraging us with questions, and they're like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And I thought to myself, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out what the secret is to get big in Japan. But the reality is, like, the secret to that sauce is just, there's no way to just entice someone with magic. The work has to be good, is ultimately what it boils down to. And there's no formula for me to tell you in terms of what that is. But like I said, I mean, our Japanese readers now, they read all of our books. So even that guy, he heads the Dojin circle for Kamen America, but his banner is Soulfinder. And they've all done reviews of like pretty much everything that we've owned. So they all say the same thing. Even in Japan, they say, iconic comics, if you see that branding, it's a good book, and you should pick it up. And so we're happy to say that, at least for the most of us, the Japanese audience makes up at least 20% of our readership, just all across the board.
And then can I ask Doug Ernst how he got a Japanese audience? Because his book is like,
I'm just riding Tim and Mark's coattails with the Japanese audience on some level. No, as Tim said, like, it does have to be good. So, I stand by Soulfinder as a product, but the same guy as Tim was saying that he was reading the Kamen America books and translating them. At some point in time, he picked up Soulfinder, and he obviously liked it enough that he started translating Soulfinder as well. So it's really that, as Tim was saying, time and place, and you can't predict a lot of this stuff. You just have to put your best work out there and hope somebody sees it.
And I think the big thing for Doug is it was sincerity, because, for example, if y'all watch anime and read manga, like, I've watched enough to know, okay, here's the episode where they go to the shrine for New Year's Eve. Here's the episode where they have Christmas. Here's the episode where you have these like environmental and seasonal tropes. And it makes you think like, well, Japan must be a heavily Shinto religion and they all take it seriously. Well, not all of them. I mean, there's a wide array of like religiosities over there. But to have it be authentically Japanese, they want to put their best foot forward and show you culturally, this is what we do. And what they like about Doug's work is they said, we're used to seeing a lot of media where it's like, oh boy, there's a priest. I wonder who the bad guy's going to be at the end of it. Where it's like, we're kind of tired of this. Do you guys not like your own religion? Why is every Hollywood movie and TV show, why do you demonize your own religion? And they read his book and they said, your priests are the good guys? That's insane. Like, that's mind-blowing. And so it was like, it was authentic. And so he would tell his Japanese readers, like, you should read the book because he actually talks about like Roman Catholicism. And it's not preachy. It's just like, that's just the world that they're in. And the same thing with like Kindred Heavens. They said, they look like it looks like a Ghibli work. Like it looks like something that you can tell was inspired by us. They look at Sven's work and they say, you can tell that it comes from a European kind of like no holds barred storytelling model. And so the one thing that we all have in common is that degree of sincerity and authenticity. And the foreign markets are not dumb. They know that. And they can tell, like, you can tell that they're putting their best foot forward when they produce these works. And so I think that's the one thing that kind of unifies all of us is that we put in 110% and we don't pull punches whenever we produce and create stuff for our readers. Okay.
You said that I came in a little late, so you may have already hit up on this. When you have your works translated from English into other languages, does it ever either improve the story or take away from the story? Because translations, we don't always have the same words in English as somebody may have in Japan that translate to the exact feeling that's going toward what you were looking for.
I would say 99% of it goes through because the good thing is that we have two translators who are fairly bilingual and they're pretty familiar with American customs and so they know the meaning. But sometimes it's transformative in a good way because they have like a word substitution that's even funnier or kind of the equivalent in their language too. But I mean, that is like a tricky thing is that obviously, like I don't speak Japanese, my writer does, like he's semi-proficient in it, so he's able to pick up on some things. But for example, in Japanese, so we have a character named Badger who's a capybara. It's weird, I know. So he's a capybara, but his name is Badger. But in Japanese, they don't just translate, they don't use the characters to just have to be like Bajaru. They don't say that. They literally translate as Badger the animal. So it was funny because that was like a change. We said, no, keep it that way. Don't say Bajaru, keep it as Anaguma, because in Japanese, that's the word for badger. And so the joke actually comes through because it's like, Anaguma? He's not an Anaguma, he's a capybara. Like, why is his name like that? So we have those instances where it's like, we have to make the decision. Do we do a one-to-one translation or do we take the opportunity to kind of improve on something that is going to be funnier or works better in Japanese?
All right, let's give him one more round of applause for Evelyn.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say that as many of us know, you guys have inspired and made an impact on other creators, such as Doug. You made such an impact that you became a super villain within Marvel Comics that was the creator of Hydra. And I know that you guys, Tim, you helped make a children's book at one point, but I do know that you guys get talked to by other creators and maybe inspire them in other ways. Is there anything you guys can share?
About inspiring creators?
Yeah, or like maybe an interaction with another creator. Probably a nice one.
We just have a lot of really nice ones. I talked about it yesterday on our panel, but just having a lot of people come from all over. I mean, there's a gentleman here from Puerto Rico. So for those of you who are here from Texas, we get to meet people from literally everywhere. And now with Sven here, all over the world, because he came all the way from the Netherlands.
From Amsterdam.
From Amsterdam, direct flight from Amsterdam to DFW, and I picked him up, showing him a good time, so he'll hopefully come back next year. Yeah. But I think that's the most heartening thing is meeting people. one thing that a lot of creators who are in the independent space say is they say, you don't need to do conventions. Who cares? You want to meet me? Meet me on YouTube and give me a super chat. That's how you meet me. And we're like, we're going to meet you in person. And you know, you come and say hi to us and everything like that. And that's the part that we enjoy, because like what you were saying is like, it's one thing to sit behind a screen and be like, oh, they're critiquing my book, like, yeah, that's fine. But it's another thing when they meet you in person, they tell you a personal story and take time to hear that. Like, that's really, like, that's, in my opinion, that's the thing that kind of makes it all worthwhile.
I second that.
Similar to Tim, and like instance from today, there was a young lady that came up to me and she gave me her book, and when I opened it up, there was a handwritten note. Well, actually there was two. So there was you, but then there was another young lady who gave me her book, and when I opened it up, there was a handwritten letter about how my books affected her. And it's stuff like that where I wouldn't have ever been able to experience that without coming here to Bell County Comic Con. And so that's one of the reasons why I like coming and meeting people and face to face and shaking hands and that sort of thing.
This is Sven's first Comic Con, so we're gonna let him say like what your experience has been like.
My experience so far, I mean, it's been really busy and overwhelming for me. Of course, I traveled like 30 hours coming in here, but it's been amazing just meeting everybody. Yeah, it's just been awesome, honestly. But yeah, it's been very big. When I went to bed the other night, and I kept trying to take off my glasses, but they were already off. And I just kept seeing people moving in front of my face. Yeah, it's been really weird, but awesome. So I might be back next year.
Might be, hopefully.
Hopefully.
You'll want to share something?
Well, there was so many memorable interactions, and but there were so many overall that you'll never be able to remember all of them. But it's just so overwhelming, like Spence said, the positivity, and hearing the impact that you can make on people, and it makes it just feel so real to get out and see you guys in person.
Actually, we had a lot. Every interaction we've had has been great, but we had one person that came up to us specifically, and they told us they had driven 5 hours just to see us, and that our comic was the first comic they had ever read, and it was what made them want to start reading comics, and then made them want to start making their own comics. And it got me to the point where I almost started crying at the booth, because I remember when I was 15, 16 making comics, and nobody was reading them, nobody cared about them, and it's really cool to think that we're able to inspire people and get them to read more books.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys down in Hall A. Thank you.
Thank you.